All right, let's head out west into the conference which is just a touch behind the Eastern Conference. Lakers and Rockets get underway tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But first, the Clippers and Nuggets got going last night. Well, at least the Clippers did, as they built an 18-point halftime lead and cruised to an easy win. Kawhi Leonard scored a game-high 29 points, and the Clippers put the clamps on the Jamal Murray show, holding him to just 12 points after his breakout performance in the first round. So, Cody, do you see the Nuggets getting this turned around, or will we see more of the same in Game 2 and so on?
Probably not. I was pretty high on the Nuggets in round one. They kind of let me down a little bit, but they got the job done in the end. But I think when we kind of previewed the possibilities of after the series, we said the Clippers Nuggets, being a likely round two, and we already had thought the Clippers were a bad matchup for the Nuggets, and I think we were proven exactly what we thought was, in this situation. So it starts off really with Kawhi Leonard, right? I mean, this guy is playing in another stratosphere right now. I mean, I guess playoff Kawhi is just a thing from now on. Like, he's just going to chill in the regular season and then just go scorched earth in the playoffs. Like, his play through the Dallas series and now in game one from last night is some of the most remarkably efficient, brutally effective basketball like you're going to see. I mean, those ESPN stats and info guys, they can draw you a lot of comparisons to some mid-90s Jordan if you wanted to during this series. I mean, it's the mid-range game, what he does on both ends of the floor, it's ridiculous. He was 12-16 for 29 points last night, and the Nuggets really have no answer for him. And there's no one on that team that you can go, oh, well, you're a guy you can slow down Kawhi. Like, I mean, they did okay with Donovan Mitchell in some games, not so much in others. And Kawhi is just destroying them. And that's the biggest problem they've got. The other problem is Marcus Morris has been playing really well for the Clippers, and he's actually giving them they're about 20.4 points per 100 possessions better with him on the floor this postseason than without him. And he's covered up for a lot of the Paul George slack that's been going and coming and going. I mean, I know Paul George had one bounce back game, but even last night he was just, okay. I mean, wasn't really what you would expect. I mean, and again, he just probably doesn't really have to be when you're already destroying him like you are. So, we'll give Paul George some credit. Maybe he didn't need to. But as far as Denver goes, they haven't gotten a lot from some key guys outside of Murray and Jokic either. I mean, Gary Harris, he came back and he's put some nice defensive injection that was desperately needed into this team. Hasn't really done much else on the offensive side. Michael Porter Jr. has been almost radio silent since that bubble ended. He was a bubble MVP or whatever we were calling him, and they haven't gotten much out of him. And this bench without Porter Jr. just doesn't have a lot to him. And if Denver's going to get back in the series, I think Michael Porter Jr. has got to be someone that can punish this kind of struggling Clippers bench. Some of these guys still really haven't gotten their feet back under them, it feels like. And then on for the starters, someone like Grant or Millsap or Harris, someone's got to step up besides Jokic and Murray in this two-man show they got there. So, yeah, I think Denver's going to play better. I don't think they're going to get stomped again the rest of this series, but it's clear they are gassed in that Jazz series. They don't match up well to begin with. I think that I predict that Jokic is probably going to have a career game in one of these games, and he's going to steal them one. But Clippers close this out probably in 5, maybe 6, if the defense slacks off or Paul George takes another vacation. Oh, and by the way, if Paul George does actually get back to how he can play, might be looking at a sweep.
Yeah, I really don't. This is about what I expected in this series as well. I think you're absolutely right. I think the Nuggets could possibly get one game, but I think the Clippers win this at 5 at the most. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just real simple. The Clippers are a superior basketball team. I mean, there can be no denying it. And this is what we expect. And a performance this is why I have believed all season that the Clippers have the best shot of winning the NBA championship. When you look at what they can do on both ends, I mean, I think part of the reason we haven't seen a more consistency from them is because they know how good they are. They know how talented they are. And also part of it there's been a lot of moving parts. Marcus Morris was a mid-season acquisition, as was Reggie Jackson, Patrick Beverly in and out of the lineup. We also talked about Paul George and his injuries that he's dealt with. Kawhi Leonard, and he does his load managing thing. So there's been a lot of, chemistry issues that they've been working on throughout the year. But they were tested in that first round by the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic was fantastic in that series. But I think that series actually benefited the Clippers. And now this was a fantastic performance, particularly on the defensive end. You think about how impressive it is to hold a team under 100 points in this brand of NBA that we're seeing now. And think about, and not only that, 97 points, but think about this, especially when you compare to what Denver did in the first round. Nikola Jokic scored a game high grand total of 15 points. 15 points for Nikola Jokic, and the Jamal Murray show, which was just absolutely out of control in the first round, he gets you 12. So your two players, which have basically been doing everything, they get you 27 points. Well, you have no chance because, as you mentioned, I mean, really nobody else has came to the party. And you're right on the money when you talk about Michael Porter. I've talked about how the bubble has, led to some aberrations, and a lot of people got fooled on some of this stuff. I mean, remember about Portland Trailblazers? Oh, here they come. Lakers are in trouble. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we see that. I think the one thing I got suckered into was the Michael Porter show. Michael Porter was great in the bubble. Not so much in these playoffs. He's been quiet, and he was silent last night. And that was the guy. That was that third guy, especially with no Gary Harris. Well, he's back now, but he's clearly not himself yet. And no Will Barton as well, who is your kind of their version of Lou Williams coming off the bench. So they really don't have a lot, or they really don't have an answer if Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray are not going to perform as they did in that first round. And I've told you before, that Jazz Nuggets series, I mean, whoever came out of that series, they weren't going to stand a chance because neither of those teams was playing defense. And if the Clippers are locked in on the defensive side, you're in trouble because they can score the ball too. And Denver it's been very rare occasions. I know that game 7, they played pretty well on defense. But besides that, they haven't shown up. Their best two players are primarily and almost all offensively driven players. I mean, Jokic isn't playing defense. He just can't do it. And Jamal Murray, he's an offensive player right now. I don't look at him as anything, to worry about on defense. And you compare that to the Clippers. Their best two players are two-way guys, and they're two of the top 5 two-way players in this game, in Kawhi and Paul George. I mean, Kawhi was you mentioned it. He was just absolutely exceptional last time. I mean, 12 for 16. I mean, that's video game like. And you're right. Listen, I know Donovan Mitchell was getting a lot of love for that first round series, but if you can't handle Donovan Mitchell, good luck handling Kawhi Leonard and Paul George even. I mean, you got Marcus Morris just lighting you up, and Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell have not even hit their stride yet. They have not had one of those breakout performances yet. I think Montrezl Harrell was getting a little bit closer. He had 15 last night.
19 minutes.
He's getting closer, but it's still not up to par with his regular season success he had this season. But I think that's coming, and when that's coming, good night, Denver. Denver's they're simply not good enough, and the Clippers play both sides of the ball. The Nuggets do not. The only way possible that Denver wins a game or makes this somewhat of a series is if the Clippers just decide one night, well, we'll take it easy this game and we'll let them get a win. I mean, that's the only way.
Yeah. Real quick question. Do you think is it fair to say that after Luka hit that big buzzer beater in that series that the Clippers just flipped a switch on defense? Like it feels like they just went and just turned something on, and then ever since then they've just been like so much more focused on that side of the ball?
It could be. And again, it could be one of them situations where, I mean, again, that was a 2-7 matchup. And it could be just one of those situations where they walked in and said, oh, it's just the Mavericks. They're too young. They're not ready for this. And remember, Kristaps Porzingis didn't play that game. Those type of things can lull you into a false sense of security. And we talked about it. Remember Milwaukee in game 1 against the Orlando Magic? I mean, they got completely outclassed in that game by an inferior team. And a lot of it had to do with, in my opinion, that they didn't come out with the right focus. When you don't come out with the right focus, you risk getting embarrassed and you risk getting beat. And that could very well been a wake-up call for them.
All right, man, let's go over to the other Western Conference semifinal. We got Houston and the Lakers, very different brands of basketball. So which brand do you see prevailing in this one?
Well, this is an absolute fantastic matchup. And I saw a graphic earlier today that I don't know I don't remember the exact, how long ago it's been since we've had 4 players in a series that averaged 25 or more in a regular season. But we got one right here. We got AD and LeBron for the Lakers. And Westbrook and Harden are coming at you for the Rockets. Obviously, we know since Houston traded Clint Capella over to Atlanta, and they got brought in Robert Covington. They fully committed to small ball, and I've talked about how that's really benefited Russell Westbrook since they made that move. We know James Harden and what he does. He's still been giving that consistent production. And meanwhile, the Lakers are just the opposite. And without the services of Avery Bradley, they become even more front court oriented, even though you have LeBron James in writing, playing the point guard position at 6'8" and the Mack truck that he is. So it's absolutely a contrast in styles. It's gonna be the Lakers inside, how they're built on the interior against the Rockets, and we know that they're just gonna shoot threes the entire game, and get to the free throw line sometimes, but they're not gonna be in many mid ranges and many post ups. We know that about them. But I've been Lakers and Clippers in the Western Conference Finals all year. I'm sticking to it. I do think this is a long series, though. I think this is a brand of basketball that can give the Lakers trouble, because as I talked about, they're not that strong at the guard positions. I'm uncertain on the status of Rajon Rondo. He was out with the thumb injury. I don't know if he'll be back. And if he's not, that hurts to some degree. They will have Danny Green. They will have KCP. Caruso off the bench. He can give you some minutes and help out, especially on the defensive end. I'm uncertain on how LeBron will play. I don't know if he'll match up with Harden or Westbrook at all. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Lakers match up against the Rockets backcourt and see how they play. And then on the flip side, it's going to be the Anthony Davis show, in my estimation. I mean, get ready, PJ Tucker. You're going to be in for a battle. And, PJ Tucker, he's about as tough as anybody in this league. And that's one of the things that the Rockets, they must have told him right when Capella got traded, like, good luck. You 6'5"? Well, you're built pretty good. We'll throw you in there against all the centers and, inside interior players in this league. But for the Lakers, it's real simple. Anthony Davis for them to win this series, Anthony Davis has to be dominant. In my estimation, I think he needs to average 35 points a game in this series, and I don't think there's much excuse. And the Lakers need to be, and especially when you have a post player or an interior guy like Anthony Davis, not that he can't play on the perimeter, but when you have a mismatch like Anthony Davis, it is predicated on LeBron James and their other backcourt players to give him the basketball. And it has to be a consistent – they have to punish the Rockets on the interior for playing this brand of basketball. They absolutely have to make it an emphasis. And I don't care if KCP, Danny Green, I don't care if they shoot the ball at all. Some of Danny Green better not take a shot unless it's out of a double team that LeBron or Anthony Davis draws. AD's got to dominate this series, and not only on the offensive end. On the defensive end, he's got to dominate as well. And he's got any time that the Rockets drive the lane, he's got to be in there. He's got to say, no, you're too small. Get this crap out of here. That's got to be the mindset. So, I mean, listen, it's hard to bet against LeBron James in this type of series. I just can't. It's just very hard to imagine, even though I think this is a 7-game series, it's so hard to imagine that the Lakers with LeBron James come up short. And it's also hard to imagine on the other side, James Harden and Russell Westbrook coming up big, because we've seen them come up small on too many occasions. And again, that was a long series that they just played with the Thunder. So there could be some fatigue that they're dealing with, much like perhaps the Nuggets were dealing with against the Clippers. And I will, again, throw this out there. My defensive strategy against the Houston Rockets. I would let Russell Westbrook play one-on-one with Anthony Davis the entire series. Yeah, I would guard Westbrook with AD and try to coax him into taking jump shots from the mid-range, because it's going to be tough for Westbrook, even though as great as he is, AD with that length and that wingspan, he's going to cause problems and be able to alter some of those Westbrook shots. And then if Westbrook's just doing his thing by himself, nobody else is going to be a rhythm. So those role players like Covington and Daniel House, Tucker, they're going to be completely out of rhythm, be uninvolved. Of course, Harden's going to get his time to go one-on-one. But the other key part in this series is the Lakers, and we talked about with the Bucks. The Lakers got to protect the basketball. That is Houston's best defense. If they can turn the Lakers over and get out and run again, that's where Westbrook's at his best. Then Houston will be a real problem in this series for Lakers, and they could have a great chance of winning it. But if the Lakers protect the basketball and AD dominates, they should win this series.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, like you said, the biggest thing you'd say is OKC just took them absolutely to the wire in that 7-game series. And like we saw with Denver, they came out really, kind of noodle legged and a little bit behind the curve a little bit. Lakers have had several days off. And as far as the legacy thing goes, obviously the Rockets have some serious aspirations, but the Lakers really even more so. I mean, they are, as you would say, pretty much the co-favorites with the Clippers, whoever does come out of the West. But for this series, you look at more the X's and O's of it. You would say that, well, the easiest thing the Lakers can do to counter the small ball of the Rockets is go big. Right. And simply that does sound like, oh, well, of course, big guy versus small guy, big guy wins. But like, what does that actually look like? When we break it down a little bit. So, in this series, obviously expect a lot of Anthony Davis. No doubt there. But I also expect big things out of McGee and Howard. I think all three of those bigs have to be meaningful contributors in this game. And this is the thing. When the Lakers, when they're defending Houston, right? Houston makes their money with ISO penetration and kicks, basically to anyone because they can all shoot. So their offense is essentially, Harden or Westbrook driving in, and then if it's one-on-one, just them versus another guard, where they are no question elite finishers at the rim, they can take their man one-on-one. Or if the big slides over to help, then they've got an outlet to pass, or they can create a series of events that gets them a fairly open three-point shot. So that's how they get around the problem on offense where most people have one big in the paint. This happened a lot with Steven Adams in OKC. He had to make he had a lot of bad choices. None of them were good on defense. So that's what they can do is the Lakers can employ two bigs, and that's going to close off the paint. No matter which side of the paint you drive on, there's a big waiting to shut you off, and it's going to force Houston to have to create a lot more of their shots. And some of the advanced metrics say they're not nearly as good at that. And when they are kind of stuffed on that initial drive, it creates a lot more problems to that offense when everyone else is just kind of standing at three-point line, just waiting on their free pass and free shot. And on offense, the Lakers, they don't want to go tit for tat and guard ball. Like you said, I mean, if you play guard ball, you're going to get destroyed by Houston, no doubt about it. And Houston on defense, they figured out how to defend one big. There's another problem they have. You said PJ Tucker, put some insoles in your shoes. That's all we got. Or maybe Robert Covington. Like, Covington or PJ Tucker is your center. It's hard. But they figured out a way to do it. But they swarm the paint. They deny the ball in the first place. And they can cause turnovers. They can cause chaos. And just really double teams in general because whoever's on the weak side just comes over to help. And if the pass is made, that defender is usually fast enough to get back out to that shooter to contest it. But the Lakers they can punish this. You just get two bigs and put them in the middle. One guy gets double teamed, lob up, no problem, 7 foot, throw it down, forget about it. And that's going to cause Houston a lot more problems. That's going to oftentimes force them into these post-ups and these isolation situations. Anthony Davis versus P.J. Tucker in the post. Yeah, okay, sign me up for a lot of that. So I think Houston can – I think if they're shooting lights out and they're even making like tough shots, they can win a game or two in this series because the Lakers are going to struggle at times on offense. They're streaky with shooting the ball. Sometimes one of their big stars don't always have a great game, but if they can utilize their bigs correctly, I think they can take Houston in 5 or 6 games.